Now, a person who doesn't value anonymity, a person who, I have to take a picture in a suit with another person in a suit, you know, even if like we don't come from the same background. And those are like the most often ifs, right? Those are like the most often, I got your moments. That's what you have to be worried about for that person, right? As opposed to someone who is just living a simple life, who doesn't want contact with people, who doesn't want phone calls. These are the people you can trust more. You see women who, you know, it's that same pressure law, right? That same Moore's law, right? You see this. Women who get approached by men, right? They don't know who to pick and choose from. So what ends up happening is they lash out. This is not directed at the man. This is directed at their availability to themselves, right? Their creation. A woman, she ultimately who gets approached by so many different men, right? She ultimately ends up committing polyandry, right, which is a sin. Um, and the reason it's a sin is because we all know that the women, right, they hold the gene to the home, which essentially like, it's the nation. They hold the gene to uh, the nation. You don't have a child with someone and then you leave and go to a completely different nation. No, the kid, he stays in that nation, right? This is how you get the idea and the irony of having a law, or a ordinance or a rule. They have to govern the people who are ungovernable. So she ends up having a child with like two, three, four, five, six men, right? um those bloodlines will eventually uh recount, because you can't occupy a space and have speed at the same time, right? Which means you can't have speed to go to somewhere else and to ultimately rest, right? Because if you're going to rest, right, the nearest object that's going to be near you is a refrigerator, so you can get water, um, um, a cooler, so you can get snacks. This is going to be the average life for the person who is living, right? For Jesus, right, it was a camel, so he could get milk, um, and basically a pulley, right, so he could carry things, like such as a mule. So humpback, comeback, comeback thing, humpback, humpback, comeback thing. So this is what you see in society, right? This again, this is pressure law. This is Moore's law. So you see these things, and you often notice, right, when you repeatedly see these things and you become intolerable to it, to the point where you don't want to think about it. You just want to be normal in society. You tend to see that even the most important people, in life's way, right? The people who are often perceived as the um, sole source to that of to the sole source to where they are perceived to affect uh, everyone's existence, right? You see that even themselves, right? You start to learn like even they don't know what's going on, right? Like you'll see a man who is like 300 pounds and he will be telling you all these things about, you know, I'm going to make sure, doctors are taking care of your health. I'm going to make sure every family has a child. You don't think about whether or not this person has a child, right? The things you start to figure out is that this person is running on a pretentious belief, right? Their marriage isn't working. They probably don't have marriage. Um, they become someone who you look at and say, I wonder what this person is going to do in this situation or this situation. You tend to not even ask anymore. You tend to just take reality and say, you know what, I'm going to do what's most important for me on this day, right? It goes back into that fact of men wanting to gamble and knowing that they're not supposed to gamble. And this goes into women, right? Engaging in frivolous encounters, at supermarkets, on the highway, right? They're driving past someone and they're fingering someone, like, flickering them off. Um, so you see all these small encounters, and what ends up happening, right? They end up becoming volcanic. They explode. And this is why you have 24-hour news. And in 24-hour news, right, there's always a push for propaganda, right? So this means that, the politician is going to come after the 18-year-old gets into a shootout with the 16-year-old. And the politician is supposed to be looked at as a confidant. He's supposed to be looked at as someone who would stop disagreements and beefs, even if, like, he's incommutable, right? You don't see him, you can't touch him, you can only see him through a television screen. You know what I mean? So, great piece, Yakoki.